Hello and welcome to episode 263 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, my good friend and co-host Sarah Says will be joining me. Last week, we started our conversation about the musical Hamilton, which can be seen on Disney+. Both Sarah and I were history majors in college, and our main focus was comparing the depictions of the various founding fathers in the musical to the actual historical record. In July, the United States will commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We thought this would be the best time to have this talk. Before we get started, I need all of you to take 30 seconds right now to ask yourself if you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We have now been posting new episodes of the podcast every week for over 5 years. Reward us for all that hard work by subscribing. It's also the best way to ensure that you don't miss any new episodes, videos, vlogs, or other content. Also, make sure to go back and check out past videos and vlogs. Click the like button on everything you watch and drop some positive comments. I'm working on a lot of big things for later this year. You won't want to miss out on them. At no point in the half-decade we have been doing this podcast have we ever made a dime. Yes, we've helped raise money for charities, contributed to fundraisers that have raised thousands of dollars, but we have not benefited monetarily at all. All we ask is that you subscribe, comment, like, and share so that we can break through to the next level in the YouTube algorithm. Let's get right into today's conversation. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
We are starting the second part of our conversation about Hamilton. And if you're sitting there like, well, I didn't listen to the first part, what did I miss? So there you go. You can go check out last week's episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty.
Just so everyone knows, I did not know Rick had either of those puns from the first episode. If you haven't listened, go listen. And this one, it was a total surprise to me. So good.
Okay, so now we have to move on to Daveed Diggs. Amazing. My personal favorite performance of the Hamilton version that is on Disney+. However, a very, very close second has to come from my area of the country, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the pride and joy of Amish country, Jonathan Groff as King George III. You have mentioned already the King George III part is a way of taking this hip-hop infused modern version of a musical and tying it in to a traditional musical with a traditional musical style, while also setting the king as the old world.
Right.
As the old way of doing things, while setting the Americans and the colonists and the revolutionaries as the new way.
Mm-hmm.
Having what Broadway was before Hamilton as the old guard of what the colonies were, and then having this hip-hop infused modern version be the change that Hamilton is trying to make both to Broadway and the changes Alexander Hamilton is trying to make to the 13 original colonies. So I think that this is such a great combination of describing the musical and describing the times in which the musical takes place.
Yeah, I think having this King George character, really to connect the two together to show that is a really good piece. Because, he's only on stage for a total of 12 minutes or something crazy like that. It's hardly any, but he really is kind of the glue, like you said, to bring the two parts of the old world and the new world together and make that connection. Because then you see in the show when I believe it's when the Reynolds pamphlets happens, he's on stage with all these other people that normally they do not cross in this show. So he's a really good bridge, I feel, for this.
And I think one of the really important parts that King George III plays in the Hamilton musical, like we mentioned earlier, John Adams is not represented
Right.
in Hamilton as an individual character. He is always off screen, off stage.
Right. He's mentioned.
He's mentioned, but never seen. So when they come up to King George and he sings the song about how Washington quit, and then he says, "Who's going to be in charge now?" And then he gets the whisper in his ear and he goes, "John Adams." And he remembered John Adams because he was the ambassador to Britain. And he knew that he wasn't going to be able to be the force and the figure of George Washington. So since you're not showing John Adams, you need something to encapsulate that. And King George does that. When we talk about Thomas Jefferson being this wilting flower, but larger than life in the view of his countrymen, John Adams was almost the exact opposite. John Adams was loud, opinionated. He gave long, fiery speeches, but because of his appearance and because of some other things, he was viewed by many as being almost this wilting flower when it came to his political influence. When we look back now through modern lenses and we look at somebody like John Adams, he was anti-slavery. He was for, yes, a centralized government, but he was for basically a rule of law. He wanted to set things in motion so that people could have these freedoms, but he wanted a strong central government. He was from a big city, at least at the time, what was considered a big city, Boston. And he had that more urbane view. And at the time, he was not very powerful. And I think when we look back, I wish more men like John Adams were given power, because I think, at least in hindsight, he holds many of the views that hold up a little better, especially his son, John Quincy Adams. But this is a whole nother discussion. Anyway.
There's a great part kind of tying in the musical. We talked about in the first episode about 1776 and John Adams, you know. There is a great part that when you're mentioning him and the whole wilting flower is where Lin-Manuel Miranda pulled a lyric out of 1776, directing it at John Adams, who we don't see on stage. And he's like, "Sit down, John." And that's directly from 1776. That's one of my favorite like little nods to this character we don't actually see. And then how you just explained him, it's like you're seeing, it's like, okay, well, this is directing how he may have been treated.
And Jonathan Groff gets to be that voice that says, wait, how is this guy going to take over after George Washington? And that was important. But to also have Jonathan Groff represent the old school, and he is not old school, like he is definitely very talented and very much of the new school, but he can play that traditionalist character in such a way that it really, really worked. And I think when you're watching, especially the version that is on Disney Plus, when they can have close-ups of his expressions, and you see sometimes he's emoting so much that literally like spit is coming out of his mouth. Like, I know singer. It can be a little gross, but you can see how much he is trying to force some of these things. And he is just so talented.
He is incredibly talented. And one thing I think that's really kind of cool about Hamilton is he is, and that character is the only main character that is cast as a white person. All the other characters are diverse people from a diverse population. You only really see in that character because it's like they're trying to stay true to King George, and this is King George, and this is like this fixed piece in history and what he may look like or act like, things like that. I mean, unhinged, but it's really interesting to me that every time you see it, but Jonathan Groff is just fantastic. I have to make a quick side note. There's this hilarious story that every time he'd turn around and walk out in one of the, I think it's after You'll Be Back, he's crossing paths with Alexander Hamilton, and Jonathan Groff would take his staff and like do like golf swings and stuff to try and make Lin-Manuel Miranda laugh as he's trying to come in on this very serious like note. And I was like, oh, I just love him so much.
He is great. And on a second side note, I have to bring up that very recently here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he was born and raised and taught how to be an actor and in musicals, he did a drag story time at our local library. And the funds that were raised from the drag story time made Lancaster Pride that year free for everyone.
That's amazing. They is just so amazing.
Paid everybody's admission.
That's so cool.
To Lancaster Pride because of Jonathan Groff. He is definitely gives back to his community, and that's something that's really, really cool as well. In this portrayal, you mentioned, him being the only white character, and that is part of him representing this old world, right?
Yeah.
And it's him representing the way things were done. And of course, we know all of these people in real life were white.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, except for Alexander Hamilton, who was only half white. But even then, he looked white.
Touche. He was at least passing, right? And I think that is something that is so important in the representation, to have him be this white actor, because he stands out so much because of that. And he sings so much differently than everybody else. So that really does portray what they're trying to get across. This next actor, I am sorry, I don't know if this is culturally insensitive. I have no idea how to pronounce his name.
Oh, the actor who plays Hercules Mulligan. And you know what's funny? My mom adores this actor, adores him. She watched him on a show. Apparently he goes by Oked Iate Onaudewan.
Okay. So at least you had a problem too. So if one of us gets canceled, we both get canceled.
Yeah, we can both get canceled. But apparently he goes by Oak, according to Wikipedia.
Okay, so we're going to call him Oak. But he plays Hercules Mulligan and James Madison. So this is another actor who plays one character in Act 1 and a different character in Act 2.
Yes.
I actually have 2 podcasts. A lot of people might know this. And the other one I have focuses on a lot of Irish heritage. With 2026 being the 250th anniversary of the United States, there are a lot of organizations that are focusing on Irish immigrants and Irish Americans who had a big impact on the United States. And I actually know of an event that is happening in upstate New York in 2026, focused on Hercules Mulligan, who Oak played in Act Number 1. This was a spy for George Washington who made his way into the British Army, found a whole lot of different details, and got those details directly to George Washington. So he knew almost every move of the British for quite some time, and he was able to strategize around that. And
even the British needed a tailor.
And this Irish immigrant tailor was able to get in there and was a huge part of how the Americans won the Revolution. He almost should have been one of the people slapping 5 in the Immigrants We Get the Job Done. Because
I know, right?
He was.
I don't think a lot of people realize he's part Irish, though. That's the thing. I mean, Mulligan, definitely. But I don't think a lot of people realize that
and he had a huge influence, and that was a big story. And he played that character amazingly. Like when he bursts out, when you find out he was behind the scenes the entire time, and he just comes out like roaring, and it is such a good scene. And then he
Yes.
plays James Madison in Act
Yes.
2, which is a great counteract to Thomas Jefferson kind of following him around like a little puppy, which is very true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And also how he's always very sickly. Like that was something
mhm.
about James Madison. But once again, the architect of the Constitution and
Right.
somebody who was a very, very important founding father, but he was sort of the coattails of Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And kind of going to the casting for the Disney Plus and everything, I think they did like he's absolutely phenomenal. I love him, but I do have to give a shout out, even though he'll probably never hear it. Fergie Philippe, I think is how you say his last name, was my very first Hercules Mulligan. And he is right now, he's actually on tour playing the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, but he just like made me love that character so much. Like it's yeah, Hercules Mulligan is such a great character. And like how you talked about that switch when he goes to then being kind of like the distinguished and quiet. And it's, yeah, so good.
And there's one character from the Hamilton musical that is essentially not a character at all. And that is Ariana DeBois, who
Yes.
plays the Bullet.
The Bullet. Yes. Yes. Which doesn't even have a name in the program.
And I think that if you go back and watch Hamilton, if you didn't do this before, keep an eye out for, quote, the Bullet.
Yes.
Because as you are watching this musical at different points when Hamilton is moving around screen, the Bullet is always sort of staying within range of him during a lot of these different scenes, moving with him in a way that is different from the other characters who are even dressed similarly. And it is really interesting how they show this one character who is the Bullet
Yeah.
popping up periodically, because this is how it's going to end for Hamilton.
Right.
He doesn't know it, but we all know it. And I think that was such an ingenious aspect to add to this musical, is to have
Right.
this one character that represents the thing that's going to happen to him that we know and he doesn't.
Yeah, the one thing too is they make her stand out a lot more in the pro shot because when you when Hamilton first came out, it was a very subtle thing. And you didn't realize what this was until the very end where you see during it and she walks by like and she's holding it before it hits Hamilton, right? But in the pro shot, they made her a lot more noticeable, I feel, which is still great because, as you know, this character and you're kind of seeing how it's surrounding. So if you ever do get a chance to see Hamilton live on stage, you will notice there's like a huge difference because she is so subtle as part of the ensemble that then when it happens, you have this moment of like, oh my gosh, like it is like this mind blowing moment of this girl has been here the whole time. I mean, she's even the one who whispers to the king when John Adams becomes president. And she has all these just little places she pops up that you don't think about, like you said, until it makes this connection. And it's really interesting.
That whispering to King George that you mentioned, and she is the one who tells King George that John Adams is the new president. And that is one of the dominoes that falls
Mhm.
that leads to Aaron Burr shooting Alexander Hamilton. Once he doesn't have Washington by his side anymore,
Yep.
he is kind of a powerless figure at that point
Exactly.
because John Adams doesn't trust him.
Right.
He's not a Democratic Republican. So he doesn't fit in anymore once John
Mhm.
Adams takes control of the government. That is one of those early dominoes that falls that ends up leading to him being shot by Aaron Burr. So it's such an important aspect that they have her be the one to tell King George that this transfer of power has occurred.
Yeah, there's a lot of little nods in there that as you watch, like I said, they do make it a little more obvious in the pro shot, but you still do need to watch because as you watch Ariana DeBose's character like go around, it's like, oh my gosh, the more you watch it, the more you really pick out what she is doing that is setting the wheels in motion for the end of this show.
And I like that they do focus more in on her in the pro shot because I
Yeah,
don't think you're really thinking about it the first time you watch the musical.
right,
I don't think a lot of people are lucky enough to see Hamilton 2, 3 times on
right.
Broadway. So they're not going to
I didn't
pick
see
up
it on
on it
Broadway.
when they're seeing it in person, even off Broadway.
Yeah, seeing it on tour,
Is
definitely, but it is
still
definitely a different experience,
a
so
once or twice in a lifetime
oh,
experience
yeah,
for most people.
totally.
So you're not going to pick up on some of those things when you
Right,
see it in person. So having it be more of a focus of the pro shot
yeah,
was a really, really good decision. I know that Philippa Sue, who plays Eliza Hamilton, Renee Elise Goldsberry, who plays Angelica Schuyler, and Jasmine Cephas Jones,
yes.
who plays Peggy Schuyler. They are very important to this musical, and I want to mention them, especially the job that Renee Elise Goldsberry does. I mean, she is so good in this.
She's phenomenal. I mean, they all are phenomenal, but she that is a tough, like, that's gotta be a tough track to play, is Angelica Schuyler because it is emotional.
And this isn't as much a part of the history because I think a lot of this is added to the musical.
Yes.
I mean, even the insinuations that there was something romantic between Angelica and Alexander Hamilton,
Right.
not necessarily supported by facts, but it adds a dynamic that I think a lot of people need. I think if this was just a political, historical account and it didn't have some sort of romantic storyline or
Right.
some sort of relationship storyline, I don't think it would have been as big as it has gotten. And the fact that these three ladies just
Yeah.
absolutely brought it.
You know that as well, like their song, the Schuyler Sisters, and they're talking about and talking to Thomas Jefferson, including women in the sequel, all this stuff that it's really like hyped up from what really was going on at the time, right? And so having that female power kind of like behind it, like my big history studies were about women in the United States and like especially during the Western expansion, things like that. That's where my kind of niche is. But I love seeing, even if it is not historically accurate, I love seeing historical shows that have incredibly powerful women in it that are like, we are going to change this.
I think that is an important song too, because one of the things that Hamilton tries to accomplish is making New York City itself a character
Yes, it really does. Yeah.
and
Because I never would
centering
have thought of that.
Hamilton as a New Yorker.
Yes.
That is a big sense in the tension between both
Yes.
him and Aaron Burr and him and Thomas Jefferson. You know, he created Wall Street essentially. Like
Mhm.
Wall Street exists because of Alexander Hamilton. The greatest city in the world
Mhm.
lines, it just creates this atmosphere where New York City plays a part in the musical, not just, the even though I know for a lot of that time, New York City was the seat of government, but
Right.
they center him as this figure from New York. Even the compromise that he comes
Mhm.
up with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison involves moving the capital of the United
Right.
States closer to Thomas Jefferson so that Alexander Hamilton can move the financial situation of the United States closer to New York. There's a lot of those bounce backs and symbolisms, and that one song being such an important part of the
Right.
musical, not just to address the fact that women were not involved in this, and
Right.
we can change the races of some of these characters to show different things, but they don't change the gender of any characters.
No, they
They
don't.
understand that this is a group of people who, even after slavery ended, black people had the vote before women had the vote. It was very telling and a very important song in the entire structure of this musical.
Yeah, kind of going back to what you were saying about New York being kind of like its own character in the show is I just want to make a note. A lot of people don't think of New York being big during the revolution. They know of battles that happened there. Even my son, we're at Cub Scout camp, and the whole theme was the revolution because of the anniversary. And they made a comment about the cannons being stolen. And my kid turns to me and he goes, "That happened in Hamilton." And I'm like, "It did." He goes, "We steal their cannons." I'm like, "Yes, they did." But you think about when you think about the revolution, you think about the Carolinas and you think about Pennsylvania and like places like that, where at the time, like in 1776, it was like all that happened like Philadelphia area and all of that. And then the revolution basically ended in the Carolinas. And you don't think about that. I mean, I live in the Carolinas now, and I had this moment where I was like, I know this, but I didn't ever have it click in my brain until I heard a revolutionary reenactor talking about these places that I drive by constantly now were such a huge part of the revolution. I'm like, what? What? I mean, growing up on the West Coast, you don't feel that. So I think that, like you were saying, New York being this set, it's like, oh my gosh, New York was a big part of this. And it is in its own right, in that song, especially too, its own character.
When George Washington was trying to hold New York and the British were attacking, and eventually George Washington had to retreat,
Yeah,
the path on which George Washington retreated is what is now Broadway.
that's crazy. It's
So
so
when
like
you think
so
about it,
interesting.
it's like George Washington was retreating from the British and walking exactly past the theater where
Yeah,
eventually this musical would show. And when you contextualize it like that, it does show you that, yes, New York was a super important part. As a matter of fact, when you talk about loyalists and revolutionaries, when you talk about people who wanted independence versus people who wanted to stay
right.
colonies, the people in New York were doing just fine. They were
Yeah,
making
right?
their money trading with
Yep.
England. They were perfectly happy to stay part of the British realm. It
Yes.
was Boston and some of these other cities that
Yeah.
wanted to break away, and some
Well,
of
like
the
North
southern
Carolina
states.
was the first to go away, like break away, as North Carolina was like literally the first state to be like, "I'm out."
While South Carolina was one of the last.
Exactly, and we're
So
connected, for crying out loud.
it is one of the things that gets stressed because of the way that this was written. And there might be a lot of people who listen to the podcast who aren't big musicals fans. And
Yeah,
if you're not, I'm kind of surprised you made it this far into the second episode about this musical.
we appreciate you being here.
But if you haven't seen Hamilton, I recommend, while we're celebrating the 250th
Yeah.
anniversary of the United States, warts and all,
Yep.
it is a very imperfect union. And it was started by imperfect people.
Yes.
And Hamilton, the musical, really shows that in a way that I do think keeps you kind of positive for the future, even though they were not perfect people
Right.
and they had flaws and they were big flaws. Like when you talk about somebody having a flaw and it's like, oh, now we talk about politicians with $200 haircuts or whatever. Like,
Right.
they owned people. Like, they were
Exactly.
big flaws.
Yes.
However, if you're trying to have some sense of optimism that eventually the long arc of history will bend towards justice, I think that this musical, Hamilton, and specifically the pro shot version on Disney
Yes.
Plus, provides you with that. And as we talk as Disney fans,
Hmm.
we understand that the United States is not perfect, but there are glorified moments in the Disney theme parks, Main Street
Absolutely.
USA
Yes.
and Frontierland, and all of these places that show maybe not what history really was like,
Yes.
but what we wish history was like.
Yeah,
And
it's like the movie version.
right, and we can try to take things from what we wish history was like and take those actions and those vibes and put them into real life.
Yes, absolutely.
Sarah says, do you have anything else to say about Hamilton before we wrap up this conversation?
If you haven't seen it, go watch it on Disney Plus. If you have seen it, go watch it again. Because, like Rick said, we are at the anniversary, 250 years. That's a big deal, considering we're like a little baby country. So, so
A
yes,
quarter of a millennium.
I know it's an exciting, exciting time and a not so great time. So go and watch something and have some fun.
All right, one last thing before we go here. What is your favorite song in Hamilton?
Oh, my favorite song. Okay, this is like totally cliche, but it's You'll Be Back. But it's because it was the only song that would get my kid to stop crying when he was a baby. When we played it, we'd play it over and over and over, and it would make him stop crying every time. And so You'll Be Back is my favorite song.
That has one of the greatest lines in the entire musical when he says, I will kill your friends and family to
To
remind you
remind
of
you
my
of
love.
my love.
Such a great line. And of
So good.
course, Jonathan Groff, one of the only people who could have delivered it
Oh,
properly.
absolutely.
No surprise on my end. It's What Did I Miss?
Such a good song too, though. So many cool little history tidbits stuck in there.
So many great history tidbits, but also when you think of the Schuyler Sisters song as being the one that sets
Mhm.
up Act One, I
Yep.
mean, What Did I Miss is literally the
It
start of Act
opens act
Two.
2. Yeah, it's great. It's yeah. Yeah.
And it really basically says this is what the rest of this musical is
It
going
is
to be
it
about
sets
here.
the tone for the rest of the show.
Sarah says, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Thank you. I loved this topic.
This has been episode 263 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I'll be flying solo on the show next week. For well over a year, I have been taking one episode per month to talk about the tenure of former Disney chairman and CEO Michael Eisner. In December and January, I focused those talks about the Disney Renaissance that happened under the watchful eye of Eisner. I'll be wrapping up that talk about the Renaissance on the show next week. That will be next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.